Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here with Chief Prosecutor of the Civil Rights Division of the Bexar County District Attorney's Office, and we've been talking about officer-involved shootings, custodial deaths. We haven't gotten there yet. What were we talking about when we went to break?
We had just finished that story about the Midland prosecution.
Right, okay. And so let's address briefly what custodial death is.
Custodial deaths, it's the generic title we use if there's actually a death out in the field. The person was not free to go, law enforcement, so they are technically legally in custody, and we have a death. And it also encompasses someone's in the county jail, they ultimately succumb to terminal cancer.
Oh, okay. You have to investigate that.
It's, in a lot of ways, it's a paperwork drill if the ME can say exactly what caused it. On the other hand, sometimes there may be bruises, injuries. Is this the result of maltreatment on the hands of deputies who are also law enforcement officers? So it encompasses the gamut. A lot of that requirement came as an offshoot of the Sandra Bland Act, that a separate agency has to actually do the investigation and forward it to us, but we do get those as part of our mandate and mission as well.
So that incident with George Floyd in Minnesota, because he was not free to go, that would be a death in custody?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That would be an in-custody death, and the only distinction would be based on excessive use of force instead of a shooting.
Right. Okay. And is there anything that you haven't said yet that you want the public to know about your office, or this is somewhat of a controversial issue in the media these days? Is there anything that you want the public to know when they're encountering police, or that you want police to know when they're encountering the public? This is your time for your soapbox.
Follow along with the previous caller's question, that shoot first mentality, as well as the public's get your hackles up first and egg on, if both sides can kind of take a breath. There's an author, Flynn, there's a gentleman, he's got the distinction, he's been the chief of police at the NYPD, Boston PD, LAPD. He wrote a most recent book talking about this distance between law enforcement and the communities they try to protect. And he said, the problem cannot be solved without us. And I absolutely 100% agree with that. Conversely, I've also seen we have soldiers returning from combat deployments that have to do urban warfare, that bring back tactics and philosophies they developed over there in combat to use here to the good, and they're the most reasonable approaches. 60 Minutes did a story on a program in Boston. So law enforcement has to understand the citizens here aren't the enemy. They're the community that you're there to protect and serve. And if we can move from that presence on both sides, and at the same time recognize emotions are initially high when things happen, the system clamors for openness, resolve, set a course, follow it diligently, be open and honest on the results, and it ultimately tends to work out. There was an incident in this city with SAPD, a hostage barricaded subject situation, officers trying to bring it to a close. I know the information they had when they took the shots. Unfortunately, no one knew that the complainant they were trying to protect, when the suspect walked outside, raised his weapon at officers, she was trying to shut the door behind him, apparently. And so when they fired on him, it went through the wall and got her.
Oh.
But what I noticed is the department came forward and acknowledged it up front. And there were no protests. There was understanding and remorse. So I think that's a path
Right.
forward for all of us.
Well, when I was a child, which doesn't seem like that long ago, I remember if I saw an officer in uniform in the restaurant, I wanted to go up to him and say hello and shake his hand. And I don't know whether that happens anymore.
Occasionally. One of the things that happened over 2019 before I started in this, my office participated in some town hall meetings over on the east side. Happened to meet a young man, I forget his first name, he now opens a restaurant, Homeboy Barbecues. But he was convening it to bring citizens in the community and law enforcement officers to talk, just to open up what happens inside that building. And even then, one of the participants said, look, I want my nephews here. Consider being officers in this community. We got to keep sawing at this. We got to, because it can't be solved without them. They're part of us. We are part of them. That has to, it's the one thing I got from being in a public service job for 20 years. That's the only path forward.
And one of my listeners commented that if officers are on high alert all the time, that not only do they have to worry about criminal suspects, but they have to worry about whether they're going to get in trouble or even prosecuted. Are we going to get the best and brightest candidates to do that job if they're just not willing to take that risk?
Yeah, I hear that. I understand it. My only response would be individuals that feel that way also want to be equally protected and respected when they encounter law enforcement. So that's just giving way to fear. 9 out of every 10 are what we think they are. And those that kind of aren't, there's generally universal agreement that something went wrong.
Right. In the hiring process, maybe.
Yeah, that was also pointed out by Mr. Flynn's book, that if you really wanted to elevate the standards, there's an expression in the technology, input equals output. So.
Right. Okay. So another observation I had was about, I was looking through the Bible trying to find a way to see what Jesus would say about this. And I found in Matthew chapter 26, verse 55, says, "At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds," this is when they came to arrest him, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me." And so I zeroed in on their apparent use of force, bringing that to the encounter initially, instead of not having their weapons drawn.
Great quote. Great quote. Yeah, and that then bespeaks something. Interestingly, there's a section out of 904 out of the justification defense that merely showing the intent to use deadly force if necessary by presenting a weapon is not considered to be deadly force. Now that's the black letter of the law. But as Jesus himself said, you see me in the temple every day. Why do you think that's necessary?
Well, he was innocent. We know that by reading about him after the fact. But many times an officer's coming to the scene because somebody called and said somebody's up to no good.
Typically, Officer Marquardt comes to me Mr. Harris, I'm Officer Marquardt. I have a warrant for your arrest. Now, my first reaction is going to be, what? To the degree, and if you actually have one, to the degree, then my reactions could dictate, maybe you unsnap the holster. Maybe you actually pull it out. Sir, I understand. I don't know. I simply have the warrant. My job is to take you into the court. And you can watch these things build. The officer is on sure footing if he's acting on a warrant and an arrest. If it's chance encounter and then one thing goes to another, the analysis gets very, very complicated.
Well, we better leave it at that so I can ask you about your legacy.
Yes, sir.
This is the fourth segment, so we like to talk about our legacy.
And now, it's time for the Talk Law Radio Legacy Spotlight. What's your legacy? Sponsored by Marquardt Law Firm.
Okay, so you can talk about any part of your legacy you want to, or maybe something you learned from those who have gone before you. How do you want to be remembered?
Hopefully they merge together. Professionally, within the office, I've been walking those hallways for about 20 years. And as you get to this stage and you start thinking about life after, I came across a speech given by Robert Jackson about federal prosecutors. It kind of sums up what I would like to be thought of, I hope I represent.
Okay.
The qualities of a good prosecutor are as elusive and as impossible to define as those which mark a gentleman. Those who need to be told what they are, they wouldn't understand it anyway. A sensitiveness to fair play and sportsmanship is perhaps the best protection against an abuse of power. And the citizen's safety lies in the prosecutor who tempers zeal with human kindness, who seeks truth and not victims, who serves the law and not functional purposes, who approaches his task with humility. I hope I bring a sense of that to how I've conducted the job and comported myself as long as I've been in the office. The other part is the foundation that was laid in my formative years at the academy. I hope I apply that.
You can say more. We have
Okay.
40 seconds.
The sentence out of the cadet prayer just ultimately encourage us in our endeavors to live among the common level of life. Make us choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. A prosecutor, somebody who has my position, who isn't introspective, who isn't measuring his decisions in that likeness, does a disservice. Had the chance to meet Michael Morton, and I've been thinking about that, and that's what I hope to bring to this specific application professionally. And then, by God, if I'm not living that in my personal life to my sons, then I've truly failed.
Amen. Thank you for joining us.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Each week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law Radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the 10 Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.